Hello, and welcome to Contracts Over Coffee, the podcast where we talk about all things contracting while enjoying a delicious coffee beverage. I'm your host, Ann Baker. I'm the Senior Director of Partner Marketing at Icertis. And with me today is our terrific guest, Eric Washer from Workday. Eric's the Vice President of Product Strategy at Workday. Eric focuses his efforts on the spend management portfolio, covering strategic sourcing, core procurement, inventory management, and overall supplier management process. Welcome to the program, Eric.
Hi, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Now, we'd like to start out the podcast with the same question for all of our guests. Eric, what is your story?
My story. Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me. I'm a husband of 16 years and father of 3 kids under 12, twins that are 9. So my hands are filled on the personal front. Who they just spoiled me this past weekend, but then told me Sunday night, that's over now, time to get back to work.
That's right.
But professionally, as you stated, I've been in the spend management arena. I work here at Workday, focused on our procurement, inventory, supplier management capabilities and processes, targeting the Office of Procurement. But ever since I got out of college in the late 90s, I've been passionate about tech. I got into the software world, the business software world in particular, in the late 90s. And if you all remember the late 90s, that was the build up to the dot-com bust in early 2000. So there was a lot of hype, a lot of new internet software companies using the internet to build new business software applications. And I got into a startup focused on services procurement. So this was really my first area of focus in the broader source to pay arena. Focused on services procurement, and of course contract compliance around services contracts was a big focus. And we eventually kind of got gobbled up by Ariba, so I joined Ariba in the early 2000 timeframes when Ariba was restarting after the dot-com crash. And I was part of the team that helped restart the company, move it to the cloud, focus on the core procurement, core sourcing. Built out some contracts capabilities up to the acquisition by SAP, and joined Workday, leaving from SAP just about a year ago to focus on my new challenge here at Workday. So it's an exciting ride, and looking forward to what's ahead here at Workday.
Great. Yeah, it sounds like you've had a long background then in procurement and spend management and sourcing, and all of that obviously clearly involves contracts. So let's talk a little bit about what you think is the biggest challenge with contracting today.
Yeah, great question. And I've always struggled with contracts on its own because it is very fragmented within large and medium-sized enterprises, mainly large enterprises, where the complexity associated with all the different types of contracts pull contracts into a decentralized environment. You think of the contracts with customers that are very tightly intertwined with how salespeople build proposals and do quotes and move into landing a new client and establishing the contract terms for that client is a drastically different, I call it a mega process, from the area that I'm more accustomed to on the supplier side, where you're a professional buyer, you go out to market, you're asking all these questions of suppliers, you're negotiating with them, you're making sure they meet your performance and risk standards, and you establish a contract with them to service your company. And then you have corporate contracts, you have partnership contracts, you have employee contracts, you have joint venture contracts. There's a whole slew of different types of contracts with their different mega processes that surround them. And this has created a lot of silos of contracts within organizations. So I think that has been and continues to be the biggest challenge for organizations trying to get a hold of their contracts and manage them strategically across all those types.
Yeah. And all the disparate systems that are out there, for finance and procurement and sourcing, and so trying to do contracts across all of them really requires kind of that centralized enterprise-wide look across the business as a whole. So, with that challenge of all these silos and so many different types of contracts going across each division of organizations, where do you think contracting is going?
Well, I think, I like to say where contracts were in the past, and I think in a lot of large enterprises, it's still there for sure, is the paper-based filing cabinets turned into a digital filing cabinet, but largely not that much more valuable than a paper-based contract because they're not tied into the mega processes that derive value from the contracts. In a customer contract, having it tightly intertwined with the proposal and the customer management side of things. On a supplier contract, and the entire process associated with how you manage the supplier relationship post-contract and do business with them continuously. In partnership contracts, or how the partner matures, and the tracking and either penalties or bonuses associated with that follow along, or obligations. Intellectual property contracts associated with managing who owns what, associated with how the relationship's maturing. So these mega processes are where, when you have those tightly intertwined with the contracts, that's where big value proposition associated with that relationship in contracts comes into play. And I think balancing that with a centralized contracting strategy where you do have centralized control over legal language, you do have centralized visibility and searching across all those types of contracts, so you can really understand and quickly get access to terms and risk and suppliers or customers or partners that fall into different scenarios. And that balance between centralization and decentralization, I think, is what has been the biggest challenge with contracts in the past. But I think with the current technology environment that we're in, kind of going back to where technology is really gonna address those challenges is, in the new technology that we have now with advanced federated searching capabilities, more mature APIs, REST-based APIs that systems can leverage, so that systems can act as one, even though they're not one. The ability to use those to interchange with those mega process demand systems, I think, is the balance that we're now moving into, where contracts can be centralized, but at the same time be decentralized. And with these new technologies, Icertis and Workday have worked together recently. We have a great certified connection between our systems, and a great example of using these new modern APIs to interconnect mega processes between contracts with Icertis and transaction activities. And that becomes where I think contracts can deliver on the promise that has always been the case, but technology has prevented it from being able to achieve that. And I think we're now coming into that era where we can achieve that with a new technology in the market. Machine learning, advanced searching, those types of things will be able to bring contracts more to life.
Yeah. And I mean, when we look at that recent announcement between our two companies, it's a perfect example of how you can see where contracting is really becoming the system of record across the organization, where it can pull information from Workday financial management, and it can pull information from Workday procurement, and different systems that companies are using to really manage their day-to-day business. And then you can have that standardization across all lines of the company. So really making it an enterprise-wide contracting process, whether you're in procurement or HR or financials, that you can all be leveraging the same templates, leveraging the same clauses, the same clause library to create contracts and then manage them down to the point of approvals. So, that is certainly what we've hoped as a vision for contracting for our company, and working with great companies like Workday that are so embedded in so many of the enterprises and businesses that are our customers, makes it really easy for users to be able to keep using the same systems they're familiar with every day, and to just have it tie in very seamlessly to their contracting process. So there's a lot of interesting things. Contracting doesn't sound always the most exciting topic to talk about, but when you start getting into it, you'll find a lot of surprises, and you'll see how much it just impacts all the different areas of a business. So, to that end, what do you think people would be kind of surprised to know about contracting today?
Well, I don't know, people. What I'm most surprised, and maybe I'll answer it that way. Like what I'm most surprised about in my experience with contracts up until this point is that it is such an important, critical record of truth, right? It is a core system of record between relationships with parties, whether or not it's a buyer and a supplier to buyer, employee to employer, partnerships, and how that system of record hasn't been historically a system of record like the employee record or the financial record or the supplier record or the customer record, and I think that will change because with these new technologies and how organizations can make contracts alive, right, rather than a kind of a quiet document that's stored away and people only reference it when there's a problem or when they need to, versus having it be something that is actively engaged with throughout the relationship that is being dictated by those two parties. And I think what has always surprised me is that the market hasn't seen the contract document as that critical to build the intelligence and the software and the practices around it. And I think that's changing because a lot of things we've just been talking about. But I think a good industry stamp of why that's changing is Gartner having their first MQ series strictly focused on CLM. In the past years, analysts like Gartner, Forrester, IDC, et cetera, have contracts kind of embedded in broader mega processes, right? They'll profile and rank contract solutions as a part of the CPQ, analysis, or part of a strategic sourcing analysis, but not stand alone on its own as an enterprise CLM solution for everything that goes on around all types of contracts. And Gartner has always been a leading voice, and I think they are speaking to where the future is going, and rightly made the decision this past year to look at contracts as its own space and evaluate providers like Icertis, who, congratulations, up in the top right quadrant for that, across all types of contracts. And that's why I think it's a good example of where the market's going and where it's going. I'm just surprised that it's taken this long to get to that point. But it, all signs show that it's moving in that direction now, which will be a testament to what Icertis has been pioneering and others, to have organizations prioritize all the activities around the contract as a source of truth versus being in silos embedded in all these other processes.
Yeah, I know with that Gartner report, one of the interesting things they've been saying recently is how contract management is really moving from kind of what used to be considered a nice to have to a must have. And IACCM, which is the kind of main industry body that covers contracting, recently did a survey of their user base. And I think it was something like 80% of these major enterprises were saying that within the next year, they were either already had a contract management system in place or were looking to, implement one. And so it's definitely moving to the forefront. It is, I would say, I share your surprise that with contracting being so embedded in day-to-day processes that it hasn't happened sooner. But we're definitely seeing it's kind of having its moments right now, especially with everyone moving to remote work and having to work remotely and collaborate on contracts remotely. Digitizing of contracts has become really, really important. So the next question I had was, what is one contracting tip you wish every person knew?
Well, every person, I'd say, maybe re-ask the question a little bit on large enterprises that are looking to transform and get the next level of value out of their contracting solutions. I'd say, as a tip to them, the individuals that are looking at how to get started on this, is to, really determine within your organization, can you be aligned to achieve a centralized CLM strategy? As we've talked about earlier, and you've got a lot of different parties between sales, legal, sourcing, procurement, even accounts payable, business units that maybe get into partnerships, corporate entities that derive contracts. Who can truly be aligned in a centralized contract strategy? some organizations admittedly can't do it, and that's okay. So it just means you have to determine, okay, we're only going to have a centralized contracting strategy for supplier contracts. We're only going to have it, we'll have a different one for supplier or for customers, different one for partners. But obviously you'd want to be challenging your organization to see, with leadership from legal usually as the central body, to see if you could stitch them all together to have one holistic enterprise contract strategy. And I think if you can do that, just be careful to prioritize the right features that you need for different ones. There's a lot of innovative, really sophisticated capabilities out there to support contracting. Just really, nail down what's important for you as an enterprise and prioritize that. I know in my history, some of the software vendors have probably gotten way too far out in front of their skis with advanced capabilities that customers just weren't ready to use. So just make sure you understand what you're ready to use and prioritize that as your first steps in maturing your contracting process.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a document on our website. It's a contract management maturity assessment. And it looks at, I think we did it a little bit with Gartner. There were certain levels, like 5 different levels of contract management maturity. You could kind of use that tool to assess where you are in the process, and then determine, where do I want to be next? Do I want to get up to this, super high level, or is this level good enough? And so I think that's a great resource too that people can kind of reference, and we'll tie it to this podcast just to evaluate where your company stands and think about what level and what features you want to get to. That's a great point. So now I want to switch gears a little bit. We spent a lot of time talking about contracting, but now I'd like to spend a little time talking about you, Eric. We said what people might be surprised about with contracting, but what would people be surprised to learn about you, Eric?
Well, that's a good question. I think I've used this a bit, and it always gets a laugh out of people, so I'll use it here. It's how, as I commented before, I've got a big family, very active family, constantly trying to keep up with them, and then of course a demanding professional life. And when we moved into the area, we live in the San Francisco Bay Area, bought a house that had an old chicken coop up at the top like hillside of the left part of the property, and it was all beat up, and I had 2 choices: either tear it down and have extra space, or spend some time to fix it up and get some chickens. Maybe the kids will like having chickens. So I am now 5 years into having chickens, and we've gone learned by doing. And I'll say this: if I calculate up, I did this recently just as a joke for my wife. If I calculate up, if I say, okay, maybe $7 an hour and all the supplies and work I've put into it, we are paying probably 7x more than we would in store. But yeah.
How many chickens do you have? Is it quite a few? Or?
I have now 12 chickens.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of chickens. Wow, you're a full-on chicken farmer, aren't you? That's
chicken farmer. Yeah, more eggs than we can handle this time of year.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, my neighbors just put one in here recently, and I'm waiting to see how that goes with them. It does seem like a lot of work, more work than I realized, to keep all those chickens healthy and happy. So, well, that's good. That's good. I'm glad you have some outside things going on there, Eric. You wouldn't want you to get bored with just focusing on spend management. So, to that end, when you just look at kind of what gets you up out of bed in the morning, what inspires you?
Yeah, well, I think, of course, innovation. I'm a technologist by background and at heart. But I think more so than innovation and all the new technology that's coming into the market now that can actually be used for real high value transformational use cases, like some of the things we've talked about with contracts. I think what really inspires me is how people use that technology, use that innovative technology for just humanity, right? For the basic humanity. I think there's so many examples of that now in these times, these challenging times, but also transformational times. We're seeing, really fantastic things that technology leaders, organizations that are leveraging technology to do really wonderful things for humanity. And I think we could talk about a lot of different examples. A lot of them are in the press around different technology companies doing things in a pro bono way to help move the needle on really troubling things in our society. And I think that's just a wonderful thing to see, and great to be a part of the technology world to help foster some of that.
Yeah, this is, I mean, it's nice that you're kind of focusing on that hopefulness, because during these times it can be, easy to get depressed. But when you actually look at how technology is making an impact and a difference right now and just helping companies keep moving business forward, it's nice to be a part of that for sure. So thanks for sharing that with our audience. And I think that wraps up all of our questions in the episode for today. It was a pleasure to talk with you, Eric.
Same. Thank you for having me.
And for our listeners, we encourage you to go to workday.com and learn more about Workday's products and features. And you can also visit the Workday experience page on the Icertis website to learn more about our integration and download a data sheet there to find out how our two companies and products work together to bring more value to enterprise customers worldwide. So thanks again, Eric.
Thank you.
All right, take care.